Hello, hello, good morning, good afternoon, no matter where you are. Welcome, Buy Black for Life. Come on in, Buy Black for Life family. If you are watching, please let us know where you are watching from. Welcome to our Education Saturday. And I am Jerome Hurt, founder of Buy Black for Life. And today is a amazing day for us as a group. I have a guest panelist, um, I'm sorry, guest facilitator. And he just happens to be someone that I know very, very well, as she is my wife. Um, and as you can see, she's wearing her crown. Um, let me just introduce my wife, who's the who's the queen, Cecilia Nelson Hurt.
Thank you, honey. I'm so happy to join you. So anyone who knows me knows that I'm a knitter and a crafter, and so I was gifted this crown yesterday by one of my friends and followers. And so I said to my husband, I'm gonna find a way to wear this crown every single day. So day two.
Thank you. So let me jump right in to our guest today, and she is a former ESPN sales executive who discovered her passion for designing after getting downsized. Junny's collection is bold, creatively exuberant, and inclusive, drawing on the vibrancy of her Harlem and Jamaica cultural roots. Collaboration with local artists of all stripes is fed into a collection that is wearable art. Her pieces are cross-culturally glamorous, vibrantly colored, visually and culturally reflective. A perfect reference to the vast, powerful river of African American history, multiculturalism, and Junny's own Jamaican roots that pulses and empowers the dynamic current Harlem community. Her designs are a feast for the eyes, a symphonic explosion of colors, fabrics, and shapes, trans-seasonal, fresh, and glamorous. Junny said, my mother was a seamstress. I have 5 siblings. She was a single mother. She created all of our clothing. She made her patterns from the newspaper. From an early age, I created my own pieces. People always stopped me to ask who made my clothing. Junny shines a spotlight not only on Black designers, but makers, women entrepreneurs who have pivoted from corporate careers in their mid-40s and beyond to take a leap of faith, follow their passion, and start something new. I intend to use my platform, Junny said, and clothing line to showcase the sights, sounds, people, and color of my neighborhood. I am also telling the story of African textiles. I want to be a vital part of the movement, helping to bring Black design and culture into the mainstream. The fabric sellers, sewers, and artisans often live in the shadows. Junny's mission is to be a voice for the culture, to shine a spotlight on those driving things forward. Her clothing line is a tribute to the artists, activists, designers, and key voices. Buy Black for Life, please welcome the amazing Junny Hibbert.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to let Cecilia take it from here, please.
I love it. So you know what? I'm not one for keeping on script, but I just want to tell my own story. And so Junny and I met, oh my goodness, has it been like 5 years now? 4 or 5 years?
It feels like just yesterday, but it's been a while.
It's been a while, right? Because I know this because I have 2 amazing caftans by you, but I need a 3rd. So let's get that started. But we met through Harlem Fashion Row. And I think that's so appropriate to acknowledge the work of Harlem Fashion Row and Brandis in bringing attention to the Black contribution to the fashion space. And so we met at a pop-up shop, and Junny was there, and her colors. So one, her colors pull you into her space, the colors and the textiles, and then her personality, which is colorful, warm, and inviting. And so from day one, from my very first purchase until now, we've created an amazing sisterhood, and it's been great. And so I'm just happy to be able to have this conversation, and to introduce you to those who don't know you, and to just continue to amplify your amazing brilliance.
Thank
So
you. I appreciate the work that you do as well.
thank you. I love Fest. Love
both
Fest.
on a professional front and just both in terms of the knitting and what you do with the knitting community. So I'm a big fan of yours as well.
Thank you. I love it. Well, I think 2020, a lot of people, there were many words that I've heard were buzzwords. And one key buzzword that I heard a lot was pivot. Right. And so everyone had to learn to pivot, but you have been a master of the pivot. And so your pivot from ESPN sports to fashion. Can you talk a little bit about that pivot process?
So yes, so I don't even know if it was a pivot, but back then I never even imagined using the word pivot because I'm from the Caribbean, and a lot of us of Caribbean or African ancestry, right? We're raised in traditional households where you're raised to be a doctor or a lawyer, or you're raised to be a professional, right? It's drummed into you from an early age, right? About what you need to do and your life's path, and how hard they work to make sure that you didn't have to do the things they had to do. So I was a corporate exec. I'd been a corporate exec my whole life. I'd been at ESPN for 9 years. So when I got that tap on my shoulder that morning, it was surreal. I still remember what I was wearing the morning when I was walked out with security, as they're apt to do. And it was the most surreal moment for me because I was very good at what I did. And I had, you don't even imagine this moment. And there was this moment. And for me, I just imagined that I would land on my feet. I didn't factor in all of the number of things of race and the fact that I was no longer that young executive. So I found it incredibly hard to land on my feet. And a year later, I was still struggling. And in that struggle, I had started working a lot with just local makers in Harlem, helping them with their PR, their marketing, pretty much making use of everything I'd learned as a corporate exec. And there was one woman I worked with, Brazilian in Harlem, who actually makes the most amazing hats, Kurama Diodato. And she was bringing in these beautiful textiles from India, upcycled saris. And she would cut the textiles. And literally in cutting these textiles, sometimes I used to just be so annoyed at the whole idea that she was cutting these textiles. It was like so beautiful. So, I'm still struggling. I'm still interviewing at the major publishing companies, 12, 15 interviews in, offers, gotten offers, and then offers that I thought I'd gotten weren't there. So I realized I had to do something different. I also drank way too much. I shouldn't tell you that. So Harlem, back then when we were outside, happy hour in Harlem starts at like 3:00 in the afternoon, right? So you can get a $20 cocktail for $5 at 3:00. So I would literally sit on 116 outside one of the restaurants, and there would be the call to prayer. And you would see all of the African men going to prayer in their beautiful robes, and just the color and the movement. I was like totally transfixed by the color. So she got one textile in, and I told her that I had this idea. Also, I'd get calls from friends like, can you come out? And I no longer wore that suit, right? That suit, that clothing, it wasn't me. I was becoming this other person. So anyway, she gave me the fabric. She's a trained designer. I'm not. I went to the market on the African market on 116. And I know everyone there now, but I was looking for a tailor. And I'm like looking at everyone, and everyone is like, what is she doing here, right? So then this woman called me over, Madame Sabina. She's like, child, what are you looking for? Can I help you? So I told her how I had this idea and I needed a tailor to just make up this piece for me. And she sent me to a tailor called Dembo. I call him Ba, which is like father in his language, right? So Dembo, I had like, I think $75 left in my checking account. And I told him I'd give him $65 to make this piece out for me. And he made this piece for the $65, didn't use a pattern, literally went just in my mind. And when I went to pick up the piece, it was the most amazing thing. The Sunday morning, I went to my friend's house. She's frying bacon for her kid. We shoot a video. I think I had probably 3 followers on Instagram back then. We put it on Instagram. And I got 14 orders with like no followers for this one piece. And that's literally how Junny was born.
Oh my goodness. I love that origin story. First of all, your story speaks to me on so many levels. You know, one of my good friends, Duckett, Tashonda Duckett, formerly of JP Morgan, about to head over to Teachers Insurance. One of the things that I always recall her saying was that regardless of your role, you rent your title, but you own your character, right? And so you have always had this in you, this ability, right? And I think about, and you know, again, my parents come from Panama by way of Jamaica as well, and so my grandmother was a seamstress. And so reading and knowing your bio, I see a lot of that. And again, the fact that I am also in a fiber, even though I have a corporate role, right, but my passion is still in that fiber. That's so key. So what has being in fashion now meant for you, for this chapter in Junny's life?
So for me, you know, and you know, fashion is hard. And as an entrepreneur and as a clothing designer, I can tell you all of the hardships and the complexities of fashion as a Black creative in this space. It's not for the faint of heart, I'll tell you that. I literally was on a Harlem Fashion Road, their annual, and Tom Ford was like, if you could do something else, do it. But if you really love this, then you should do it. So he's like, literally, I'm telling you to do something else. So I feel like fashion was what saved me, because I was lost, because ESPN and a corporate exec was my identity. And in losing that identity, I felt like I fell down. I busted my head open. Well, I actually did, literally. And in that falling down, the fashion helped me to become not Junny and Hibbert, but to become Junny. So for me, fashion represents like that joy, right? It makes me feel like I'm alive, right? It's like, I don't think we need to metabolize what fashion is. I think when you put on that piece and you feel a certain way about yourself, it kind of crystallizes everything, right? About what fashion means. And I know fashion means different things to different people. It could be a confidence. It could be a way where you hide yourself from the world, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, for me, it's like the air that I breathe, right? And for me, it represents freedom, free to be, free to express myself, right? As an individual. For me, it also allows me to be a part of a global conversation, right? Mm-hmm. And I think with everything that's going on, and as a society now, fashion has been a way for me to work with different cultures, to bridge cultural gaps and languages, right? And identity. Fashion has also taught me respect for cultures. For instance, in my new collection, I was going to use shishiko, but now I'm following all of these Asian women and, you know, their concerns with cultural appropriation, right? Yeah. And as a community, as people of color, we talk about cultural appropriation a lot, but I don't know that we're as sensitive to when we appropriate other people's culture. Right. And do that every day. So I literally changed and started from using shishiko to using quilting, because quilting represented my culture. Because fashion has actually taught me to be respectful of other people's culture and to be respectful of history and to do my research, right? So that when I use something, I am using it in the right way.
I love that responsibility. I love that you have your own self accountability. And I think that's so important. And so many other big fashion houses could really learn from that, because cultural appreciation is wonderful. cultural appropriation continues to further oppress the marginalized. And so I love that you're like, you know what, I could do this, and you would honor it, because I've seen your pieces and you do honor it. But I love that you using it as this voice and vehicle to tell our own story, our own cultural narrative. And that's so important. I'm hearing so much about some of the skills that I hear you leaning upon, but when you think about, like, you know, if you were speaking to an aspiring fashion a designer and you had to give them some advice, what would you say were like 3 key skills that they should focus on?
So almost 6 years in, it would depend. I would say to get a fashion certificate or to get a fashion background, right? So depending on where they were, if they were younger, I would say to pursue the formal training, because I think the formal training helps significantly, because I believe that a base, a foundation is important, right? I've had to learn a lot of that as I go along. And I've also been fortunate to be able to, when I need to hire a technical designer, to be able to hire a technical designer. But, you know, I would say not to let that stop you. I think that one of the things about fashion, it's like to have a point of view, right? What is your point of view? You can't be all over the place. So I think it's knowing your unique point of view, right? Your individuality. And it takes a certain amount of creativity, right? And I think creativity is all open to like interpretation, right? So I think as a fashion designer, that's like the foundation, right? But I think that I would say, you know, if you want to be in fashion, then you have to learn how to tell a narrative, right? To be a storyteller, right? Because fashion is a narrative, right? It allows us to tell about joy and pain, right? Loss and redemption. And it allows us to talk about cultures, right? Quilting as African Americans, right? It allows us to tell of all our pain and adversity, right? But it also gives us a way to honor our ancestors as well.
I love the honor. There's so much there, right? And you know, having seen you in action, I really think that you being a mentor, you being an instructor, is really where I see a part of you as well, because you have your own story to tell, and that how to, you know, being true to who you are, but still being able to celebrate, I think is so key. So this, you know, we've been in, you know, pandemic for over a year now. So how have you managed, and what have you had to do to shift during this time?
As I wipe my brow, that's a great question. Thank you for that question. So, you know, I feel like as you talk about, it's a journey, right? And it's a series of pivots and constant reinvention and being flexible and not seeing anything as a failure, right? But I think as an entrepreneur, you learn how to adapt and you do what you have to do. You know, I think it's been hard for everyone. Before the pandemic, I'd actually done my first show, and I felt like I was at a pivotal moment where I was going to launch my brand, and Junny was going to become, you know, not only an American sensation, but a global sensation, right?
Yes.
And I'm still manifesting it. I'm putting it out there, right? So it was hard for everyone. As an entrepreneur and self-funded, it was hard. And it's like I said before, with the Aurora James and the 15% pledge and everything that happened during the summer with the Black struggles and the Black protests, right? It's never been easy for us creative of colors, right? We've always had to scrap for what we have and open our own doors, build our own tables, right? So earlier on, I pivoted to making masks. I was actually making masks as a part of my collection before the pandemic. Just as a way of upcycling, because I think that as designers, we have a responsibility to sustainability as well, right, and protecting our planet. And then I pivoted to the loans and the grants, and that was a full-time job, sometimes going a whole week without sleep. And then all of these loans, and you would end up with no loans, no grants at all. So I had to close my studio, but I still had my sewers, my suppliers, the people who depended on me. So I'm still creating, but I'm creating differently. So then I had to go back to what I knew best. So I'm back to being a corporate exec. So I like to say I clutch my pearls from 9 to 6. And after that, I am back to doing what I love, creating. So I do have a corporate job. I'm sales director for OK Africa, OK Player. And it's interesting in the interview process, one of the concerns was about separating the two roles. And I was like, where do I go with this question? And then I was like, you know what? You got to be bold. You got to be brave. You got to own who you are. And I'm like, you know what? I don't see them as mutually exclusive.
Right.
One forms the other. And this platform is actually a perfect platform for me because of who I am and what it represents and, and what they're actually trying to talk about. So I am actually doing both roles. I don't know if over time that's sustainable, but I think like everyone else, we're stitching and we're quilting our lives together, right? And you know how the pieces are going to fall.
I love that, stitching and quilting our life. I say we're knitting our lives, right? So I love how we use our language and the things that we're talking about. So, looking back, it's been 6 years, probably a little over 6 years. What advice would you give Junny back then? As she's starting off on this journey and knowing what you know now, what would you tell her?
Well, thank you for that question. So I feel like I'm still on that journey and I'm still starting on that journey because I'm always starting over. But I think one of the things that I would say to her is to be true to yourself. Self-doubt can kill a dream, right? To stay true to yourself. I think community is important. So cultivating community. Earlier on, I didn't have the community, right? A sisterhood and a community is important, right? Especially what our brother here is doing with Buy Black for Life, right? It makes a big difference having a community. And the advice is like, if that door closes, there's always another door, right? Push harder. There's going to be a door that's going to open for you.
I love that. If that door closes, push harder, right? Or maybe it's not your door. So it's all about finding your door. I love that. So, you live in Harlem, you have your roots in the Caribbean. And so talk to me about the influence, because again, that's I think just again, we live in Queens, but I do spend a lot of time in Harlem, and there's definitely a different energy when I come to Harlem, and I just feel the energy of the history.
Yeah.
And so living in Harlem, drawing upon your roots, what is that? How does that show up in your style?
So, it's like I can't talk about Harlem without talking about the pandemic and pre-pandemic, right? So Harlem has changed, New York City has changed, and that's kind of like the ethos of my collection. It's a love letter to my community, right? Because it's about loss and rebirth and hope and all of that rolled into one, right? But I think you went to church on a Sunday in Harlem, and I have to tell you, the level of foolishness, there's nothing like Harlem on a Sunday, right? And you have to experience it, right? Harlem, and you see like all of these mainstream designers, they come here and they appropriate the culture without really getting it, right? So there's a guy with a big boombox on the back of his bike, an R&B, or on his shoulder, right? He just has to. And then there's an older couple like dressed in their Sunday best, right? And then there's an African braider on the corner saying braid. And I'm like, girl, you see I ain't got no hair on my head. What are you going to braid?
They can snatch it.
Yeah. And it's the level of foolishness. And then it's the two girls like scrapping on the corner of 125th right there, right? It's just like everything. So for me, Harlem is just like that inspiration, that color, that vibe, right? But Harlem reminds me so much of Marais, Paris, right? Because Harlem has changed, where Harlem has become like this cultural fusion, right? You get to see so much, right? So for me, like Harlem, it's like visually, it's so stimulating, right? But for me, I experience everything in a different way if I close my eyes. So I take it in, and then I close my eyes and I allow the crescendo of sounds and the smells, right, to like overtake me. So for me, that's what Harlem represents, is just sensory excitement.
I love it. I love it. You know what? So I didn't realize what a storyteller you are, because you're telling your story, and I am transposed to that corner. I'm transposed to Sunday morning. I hear the music, I smell the food, I hear the sounds, the taxi, all of it is very vivid. I love you're definitely gifted as not only a verbal storyteller, but a visual storyteller. And owning my pieces, I feel so grand
when you wear it, right?
What? Right. And I don't limit them, right? And so, you know, the thing that I think about, and I want you to talk about your mom and your grandmother for a second. But the thing I think about when I think about my grandmother, and as she got older in life, one of the things she instilled in me was don't save anything, right? So don't save that piece of china for a special occasion. Don't save that dress. Wear it. It's yours. And so, you know, when I first got my first piece for you, I wanted to honor it, right? And I only wore it in a certain way. And then I was like, wait, I could put it on with jeans and a t-shirt. I could put it on with, and I've worn them, and I have two pieces, and I've wore it everywhere from on stage to accept an award, to in Napa, doing a vineyard tour, to just going on date night with my husband in Brooklyn. And every time I put it on, I feel regal, and I feel very proud, and I feel like I'm taking a piece of you with me. So thank you for that gift.
Thank you so much. And that's the whole idea. It's like wear it your way and play. Like, for instance, you know, my friends actually own an old dairy farm, which I go to sometimes because of COVID. You need to go out of the city, and I'm sure you've seen me. Well, you see me on the tractor or whatever. So I literally take the same kaftan that I've worn for a red carpet, the same piece, and it depicts farm life, right? Because at the end of the day, for me, fabric is a narrative and it's a storytelling, right? It's not just a piece of clothing, right? It's wearable art, and you own it, and it becomes that part of you, that part of your personality. You know, I have a lot of male clients who wear the kaftan, and a lot of them said that they're very shy, and they felt like they needed a piece that would make them bold and would make them come out of their skin and want to showcase this piece. And they tell me this is what, the piece actually does for them. And I think you asked me to talk about my mom. So, you know, my mom's been gone for a while, God rest her soul. And my niece is about to become a judge. So my mom, like most Caribbean parents, girl, it was all figured out for me. I was going to go to law school. She even had the clerkship. I'm not even making this up. The clerkship was arranged. Everything was arranged. I finished my first degree, and I decided that I was good. And I had to get away from Jamaica, because there's no way I'm going to stay in Kingston, Jamaica, and not go to law school, because you're never too old for your parent to crack you over the head, right? So even of the years when I'm like a successful exec, my mom would say, "Child, what you do again?" And I'm rolling my eyes and be like, "Mom, why don't you ask me that when I write that check?"
Right.
And say, "You always were just to, talk back, child, whatever." So when I started this journey, my brother calls from Florida, and it was always like, "When are you going to stop embarrassing the family? You need money. When are you going to move down here? Blah, 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 blah," right? Or my sister, who is a scholar, would just look at me and roll her eyes, right? And it's funny because now when I send her photos, she's like, "Lord, my sister's a fashion designer," whatever, right? Yes. So they have come full circle from a traditional family to actually embracing, what I'm doing. And it's like, for me, that's a beautiful thing, because, you think you don't need the approval of your family, but the approval of your family is important, right?
Yes, it matters. It matters. It matters, making them proud, right? I mean, when I remember when I worked in finance, and so I'm not a finance person, I'm not a banker, but I spent 13 years at Chase, now JP Morgan. My grandmother had no concept. I'm like, "Ma'am, I'm not a teller." "Ma'am, I don't work at a branch." but she couldn't wrap her head around.
Right.
I'm like, I'm in the corporate office. I'm working with the CEO of the company.
Right.
Like she's like, but I went to the branch and I asked them if they knew you. Like, lady, come on. So no, I get it.
Yeah.
And it's it's the expansion of possibility.
Yes.
And for a lot of immigrants,
yeah,
right? This is a conversation that I'm having now with even my Asian friends, right? Our parents,
the Asian community,
right?
Yeah.
Our parents lock their mind on what does it mean to be successful.
Right.
And so I'm sure if you look at your aunties, I mean, how many of them work in a medical field in some way?
They're all nurses and
they're all nurses, right? And if they leave for medical, they go to academics.
Mm-hmm.
They're teachers and professors.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they're the people that I say their job is their title, right? So it's really easy to know what a teacher does,
right.
what a lawyer, what a
right.
doctor does. But what does an HR person do? What does
right.
a diversity person do? Like, what does that mean? Like, it doesn't translate.
Yeah.
But we're all valued and we're all needed. And so I love the bragging about their sister who's a fashion.
Yeah, my niece called me and she said, Auntie, I'll show my friends. And I'd be like, that's my auntie. My auntie did that.
My auntie.
Like, oh, thank you, niece.
I love it. I love it. I love that. That is so much.
Yeah.
So now you are doing what you need to do. You are hustling. You're in hustle mode, right? And so you're dividing your time, which I get. Yeah. So what's next, and how can and what does support look like? Because here's the thing: we don't ask for what we want, right? And so if you could ask, what does support look like for you?
So the biggest thing for me, the support I lack is in terms of PR and press, especially for a creative of color. I mean, you saw what Amanda Gorman, right? She's gifted, but just having that platform, the right place at the right time. You know, I've seen like Kiri Official, Fee Noel, Kimberly Golson, and my sisters, all extremely talented individuals, right? But there are so many of us, right? But without that exposure, most of us stay in the dark and we stay in obscurity. For me, the only difference that separates me is that I am bold and I never take no. And I don't have a problem sending a note to the CFDA and said, I see you send out that invitation and I think you must have the wrong email address. But just in case you have the wrong email address, here's my email. Because I was not that invite. It does rub some people the wrong way, my level of boldness. But my mother always said, closed mouth never gets fed. Right? So yeah, I live and die by that quote right there. So I'm not sure, you know, at the end of the day, for me, I feel like you do what you do what you love, you do what brings you happiness, and the rest of the world will catch up, right? Because some of the greatest artists, right, they weren't discovered until they were dead, right?
God, we're not going to have that happen here, though. I said we're not going to have that happen here. We're going to give you your flowers while you still live. So
I'm writing a book if I ever get finished with it, and it's just everything, you know. It's like life interrupted.
When you finish?
What? I'm sorry.
When you finish, not
when
if.
I finish. Life interrupted. What's lost is not really lost, right? And it's kind of like looking at everything in between that, right? The question of what's really lost, right? For my new collection, which is on CFDA Runway 360, I'm doing a visualizer, and I've just actually an amazing young lady still in high school, but she's a film student. So I'm doing a visualizer for the collection because I think one of the things that COVID taught a lot of us designers when everyone was locked down at home, we saw what happened with D Nice, right? It's about, we have to learn to create differently. We have to learn to present our story and ourselves differently, right? So I am going to show the collection in a short film, but in a short film that's a narrative about how COVID changes your life and how that garment and everything, how it's like wrapped into a personality, who we are, right? I also applied for the CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund.
Yes.
I decided that, you know what, you got to jump at some point. So I don't know. I think next week they'll announce the winners, and this is like a great year because they're doing it a little differently. So as an American designer and as a creative of color, right, for me, this would be a game changer because it's just really an unprecedented opportunity to take your place on that fashion's biggest stage. So, you know, I am feeling hopeful about that. And that definitely for me would be the biggest game changer. But if not, I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing, how I'm doing it.
I love it. And one of the most proud moments for me as a supporter and friend of yours was your feature on BET Her.
Yes, thank
you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So again, I talk about community and I talk about sisterhood. So BET has been extremely gracious and extremely helpful. And I just happened to have made friends with Stacey Harmon, who's one of the execs. She asked me to sit on a panel at Curl Fest, and she said what you said. I didn't know that you were such a storyteller. And I was like, yeah, I talk all the time. I was supposed to be a lawyer. Go figure. So from that, we developed a relationship, and then someone introduced me to Janine LeBurge. She was going somewhere and she needed a piece. And literally this piece of clothing, it's no different from what we do in the corporate world, has become like my calling card. Yes. And then there are other, Connie Orlando and a couple of other people there I kind of met through. Now Janine is wearing the pieces on the red carpet. And it's like all of a sudden it becomes this conversation like, who are making these pieces? So when they were deciding to do the piece, they actually reached out to me. And the producer called me to do a screen over the phone screen test. And by the end of the conversation, we were laughing. And he was like, oh my God, you're hilarious. I had no idea. So that's literally how we did that project. And, you know, I do some work with him, or sometimes he'll do a piece and I'll turn up in it because he's become like one of my biggest supporters, you know.
I love that.
So
I love that. Yeah, so I'm and Jerome didn't know I was going to ask that question, so we'll have to get the segment is the about her business piece on entrepreneurs, and they did a whole feature, and I was in my house screenshotting, Insta-storying it. Like, I was so proud. I was screaming, so proud of you. So I'm so honored to be able to have this level of conversation with you. Thank you so much. So we know the book is in the works.
What
because my question is what's next, but yeah. I'm going to help you. So what's next in the book, and then what would you add to what's next?
You know, the book and my collection. I would love to be a Net-a-Porter Vanguard designer.
Yes.
So, yes. You know, I am not a wholesale boutique model, and I've had some challenges because I've refused to adapt to that model. Mm-hmm. So for me, I would love to design a collection for Net-a-Porter, for Moda Operandi. You know, Bergdorf Goodman, Barney's used to be my favorite place to shop. Having, you know, like Linda Fargo has her shop in Bergdorf Goodman. I love to do my own shop. I actually had an amazing opportunity for Black History Month. Bloomingdale's had a shop for good, and in partnership with the American Ballet Theater and the National Museum of African American History. And actually featured a couple of my pieces as art in that display for Black History Month. So my hope is, and I've been talking to them, possibly designing a capsule collection.
Yes.
I'm currently working with an Italian brand who they've asked me to use their shoe in my collection when I do collection shoots, and possibly designing my own boot for them as well. So yeah, I'm working on that as well.
Okay. And I'm gonna slip in there in that list of things another caftan for me, because I feel that I want something in I feel green or yellow. I've been really in a yellow mood. So let's talk
That first
yellow.
piece, that first piece, and
My
your
red piece I love. So
Yeah.
my red piece I love, and I love my blue piece. First of all, the detail, right? So it's not only just the caftan and the print and the color, it's the inside. So when I swing it open, there's a inside fabric. There's the bottom ruffle on one.
Yeah.
There's when I flip my sleeve up, there's little, I mean, it's the detail. It tells a story.
Yeah.
And every time I wear it, I see something different about it. And so, but yes, I'm ready for a third for my collection because I want to say that I'm a patron. I'm a patron. So
you're a great friend. I mean, yeah, you're a great friend. You're my sister in every possible way.
I adore you. So I love how my husband introduced me as his moderator, whatever, but the word was co.
Right.
But I noticed he faded. Oh, look who's back. He faded to black.
The black, there he is.
I was like, I thought he went off for a minute, but then I was like, oh, he's just gonna not be part of this. So I'm not gonna let him just not be part of his own thing. So I'm gonna let him ask the last question, which is his signature question. Mr. Hurt.
So, Junny, tell us, what does buy black mean to you?
So I thought about this carefully, brother, and I hope that my answer will do it justice. So, to me, knowing so many Black entrepreneurs and going back to COVID, because I think COVID has informed in good or bad way the way we think, right, and the way we react to things. To me, buy Black means, buying the blood, sweat, and tears of small business owners, right? Who every day put their life on the line for that dream, right? I know a lot of designers that sometimes buy, it's a difference between a meal or buying fabric. They buy the fabric and go buy the meal, right? Supporting our own, the sleepless nights, the hustle, the creativity, the pain, the joy, the perseverance of people who look like us. And it's supporting talent who cannot get a bank loan. It's giving someone who looks like us a chance to dream and dream big, right? It's about building a Black legacy and generational wealth. It's pride in us, who we are, and how we support each other, right? We're quick to buy the Gucci, right? But we give our own people, and I don't say this disrespectfully to anyone on the phone. I've watched over the holidays when the USPS, God bless them, when our past administration was trying to drown the USPS, and I saw the pain and struggle of so many Black business owners, and I saw the nasty, hostile notes from our own Messi Bottle, who was actually featured. And she's also my girl. And I actually had to say, we from Kingston. And she's like, I'm from Brooklyn. They're going to need to stop that. So I think it's like supporting our own and having empathy for our own, right? That's what buy Black means, and realize that small businesses are not Amazon. There's no Jeff Bezos there, right?
Listen.
A hard part of the conversation that as people of color we need to have with ourselves, right? Having those uncomfortable conversations and looking at who we are and how we can better support each other, right? The sister's doing everything. She's a lawyer, the accountant, right? So that should give us a certain amount of empathy, right? And I think buy Black is like just that dream of ownership, right? Some days, based on everything I said, I feel like it's a utopian concept in a dystopian world, right? So sometimes for me, buying Black is the most amazing thing, and sometimes for me, it's like the most disappointing thing because of how we treat our own, right? It's like when you walk into Gucci, you put your money down, but when you come to the Black business, you want to know if you can get a 30% or a 50% discount, right? So those are some of the hard, honest conversations that I feel it's all a part of the conversation that we have to have with ourselves. And I am hopeful that platforms such as Buy Black for Life, right, can build a bridge and create more of an awareness of what support looks like, right, and how we should support each other.
Wow.
I love that. That was poetry.
Yeah, I mean,
that was fire.
You were asking if your answer does it justice. That is hitting the nail on the head. And it's my vision for us as people. And I'm very intent in saying, if you don't ask Gucci for a discount, Do not ask your own people for it. And I've been saying that forever. So thank you for that. Cecilia, do you have any more questions for our amazing guest? Because you did a
Yeah,
wonderful job.
I do. So are you around this week to take my measurements? Because I've gained a little bit of COVID weight. So let's book our appointment to get my next ready.
Maybe later in the week. So my friend who's a fellow designer just happened to have to take a day from my day job. She's getting married in the park in Brooklyn on Wednesday at 3 because it has an astrological significance. There you go with creative people. There's always some weirdness.
I know.
So I'm like, okay, 3 o'clock on a Wednesday, girl, that's not cute. So, but and she's actually not a designer of color, and that's why I preach inclusiveness. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see my platform. So sometimes it annoys my own people, but I'm like, you know what? Color, I know who I am, and I'm comfortable in who I am as, Afro-Caribbean and as a woman of color. So I don't need you to tell me who I am or to inform my Blackness. But they're also the people on this journey, right? The helpers. We call them the helpers in the room. So this woman was one of the helpers in the room long before I even imagined what this journey be, who actually opened her door and her experience as a trained designer to say, let me help you.
I love it.
Dream. So she's getting married, so I'm going to go to her wedding, but I'll definitely catch up.
We'll hook up afterward.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes.
Well, thank you for letting me. Well, I feel like it's just a conversation that we would have anyway. So thanks for letting us capture our conversation and just continue to amplify. I'm going to, I'm going to post some throwback photos of me in my outfits and just honor you and celebrate the visionary that you are. So thank you for being my sister. Thank you for being my friend.
And thank you for you. I love you. And brother, thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
I'm so humbled by this conversation, humbled by each of your presence, and thank you both. Cecilia, I should have had some pictures of you and your Kafkans so that we can have posted them here, but I have plenty, so I will put them in the chat so folks could actually see it. On
and thank you for everyone who tuned in.
Yes. So, and just for our followers, if you're watching this on replay, as we get a lot of people that watch on replay, put #replay and where you are watching from. We are Buy Black for Life. We thank you for tuning in, and we hope that each and every one of you have a blessed weekend. And thank you, Cecilia. Thank you, Junny. And for the love of our people, have a wonderful day.
Thank you, brother. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.